Not in mine.
If you want to,
oh, we have an extension cord.
If you want to plug it in here, this cart is plugged in.
Perfect. Thank you.
I was gonna say, and we also have an extension cord if you want.
To reach down or with this.
Yeah, that's not gonna reach. I was just saying we have an extension cord.
The,
You can just grab the white extension cord and plug it in there, so that way you can still work with it.
Perfect. You guys are.
There's actually a bin of extension cord. We have a bin of extension cords because
we tried.
we know people and sometimes they need to plug in.
I normally have it plugged in all day while I have everything on the board doing my Nearpods and stuff, and I completely forgot today, so it was dead at the end of my last class. Why do I always sit right in front of this?
I don't know.
Every time I'm like, oh, I'm here again.
See, she broke out the tights.
Not yet. Actually, my tights are torn. These are my leggings. These are actually a lot thicker than I wanted.
But we know you were going for the tights. There's a joke that we make. I told her, I said, once it hits below 60, she has to wear tights. Because that's why I had pants on today. Because I was like, it hit below 60. I cannot pull tights on now, so pants it
My
is.
shoes are still open-toed, gonna stay there.
For how long?
Absolutely. You know what? I do wear flip-flops until there's snow on the ground.
Oh my gosh.
When there's snow on the ground. So do I, but like, so I can't wear these when there's snow on the ground, but I do too. Like when it's not for school, but like
I wear them top.
Yeah, so we could never
We
wear
had
them.
windows open last night. 61 degrees in our apartment.
Yeah, I wish
I
I
was
could.
so mad.
Yeah,
I was like, I need to shower. I'm not going to be able to get out of the shower.
And the students were more for safety issues, right? Because as they're walking,
right,
steps on it. So the teachers couldn't.
Yeah.
But yeah, when we was a teacher day, like flip-flops. I wear flip-flops year-round.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. I think the majority of people are here. Yes. I did forget the sign-in sheet last time. I did sign everyone's name on a sheet, so you will get the points from last time. I apologize for that. We will have one for today, and if I don't have it out in a few minutes, please somebody remind me. Just going over the norms again, like we did last time. They're up on the board. We will maintain a positive tone at the meeting. We will not complain about the problems unless we can offer a solution. We will begin and end on time, which we kind of messed up that one, but it's all right. People were coming in. And we will contribute equally to the workload, and we will listen respectfully and consider matters from others. We are recording again today to post onto the website if you want to refer back to it. Last meeting it live streamed during the meeting. However, I didn't click a button, so it did not record it. I did.
Oops.
Yeah.
We're
So
on our best behavior.
I know. It was a good meeting too.
That's what I said.
So I did post the pictures. I did post the pictures of the work that you guys did to refer back to if you need to. So I did push an extra button today, so we're gonna make sure. We'll see if that was the right button to do. It's a learning thing for me too with this Wirecast program. Yes.
I just wanted to let everyone know I made the 4.1 PowerPoint if you're using mine, and I'm still in the process of Google Slides. I'm working on 4.2 now. I'm just adding it, so it will change over time. So if you look at it and it's not completely done, I'm working on it. But 4.1 is done.
Yeah, and
half of 4.2.
I posted Shonda's as well under teacher PowerPoints or information. And then I also posted, I asked Mr. Smith, who is teaching 6th grade at the moment at Lindsay, if he would be willing to share the Socrative activity or warm-up that him and Mr. Crawford did today. And he graciously shared that code with me. I don't know if you knew that, Mr. Crawford. Got the code. Thank you,
Mr. Crawford.
Yes. We saw it in Mr. Crawford's classroom this morning, and it was a recap of 4.1. So the warm-up that they did today was a recap of the investigation they did last class. So that was right. Okay, that's what I thought. I was just putting the pieces together.
Well, one actually goes way back because it asked about matter too. So.
Yeah, so it's kind of a review. So that code is in there too if you'd like to use their Socrative activity.
The other thing is, for those of you who are doing the Google Slides, that's very kind. I did put all the PowerPoints up, so they're separated by each investigation. They go all the way through 10, so if you want to start with those, they do have some pictures in there that you might find helpful when you're creating what you're creating. So they are there.
An investigation for her PowerPoint is in the folder too.
Yeah, so then if you want to pull from those, feel free. Again, their first time, I haven't gone through and really edit it. They basically follow the investigation guide. But at least they have pictures in there and questions, the guiding questions and all that. So you can easily, like I said, cut and paste from those. It's a starting point, not an ending point. So all the investigations are there. So that's awesome.
Anyone want to share anything before we go ahead and get started? I know Miss Mason had some great pictures of her investigation. Do you want to share what the students did?
Yeah. Today and yesterday we were doing 4.1, and they had a really good time with it. So we're gonna have a quick warm up for the next 2 days to see if they really grasp those concepts. But I shared the pictures, so they had really great time.
They actually did the ones with they used bubbles. That wasn't the only one.
And the balloon.
Right? They used the balloon, but so when we looked at that data, I know when you guys drew up the information, you just considered the balloon, but then the students had many other options to do. So it's kind of nice that even though you did the balloon or the bubbles or with the tube,
and we actually did the one where we did all four.
Okay,
you turn the cap upside down.
Yes,
and not every group was able to make it work because you had to hold the bottle really steady. But when it worked, it was really great because you could hear the whistling and you could see the movement.
Good.
So they, even if they didn't make it work, they could see and hear it from the other group. So we were still able to talk about the concept.
Nice.
So it was really good.
So that's good. So yeah, definitely, even if you can't get every group to try every one, see if you can at least get one group to do each of the different suggestions that they give, because I think it is really good. Go ahead.
I just wanted to kind of share the way I did it. I don't know if anybody else would want to try it. But we kind of did it one at a time. So I displayed the first set of instructions. We tried it. We stopped. Hands off the materials. We talked about it. And then I displayed the next set of directions. And so each one, we took about maybe 7 to 10 minutes because I wanted them to experience all four.
Nice.
So we just kind of paced ourselves.
I think that's fantastic. Like, honestly, all four for each student to do is ideal. But if you don't think you can manage it, then at least have them all going on with different groups, but then making sure that each group shares and they should hear the same thing, just in different ways. Right? So good. Yeah, that's a fun one, quite honestly.
Anyone?
Well, that's what matters, right? How about anybody else? Maybe, yeah, I mean, anybody else? I know some people had done 4.1. I know we were in a couple rooms. I don't know about other rooms, or maybe.
This one is always a very engaging one for the kids. Like
Just the whole investigation for, or
4.1, 4.2, 4.3, especially the first two, because 4.3 is really more of a demonstration, I think, with the little ring.
Yeah.
But yeah, the ring. I'm sorry. But
the
yeah,
sphere.
yes. But 4.1, I mean, just seeing the balloon expand and contract. Again, you had the giggles when the balloon was expanding and contracting, but ironically, those are the types of things for some kids that really help them remember it. I mean, it's sad, but for some kids, that's what's really gonna stick with them.
They're kids.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome.
Exactly.
I just want to give I was in Mr. Riddle's class Friday, and he did 3.1 with his students, and it was the kids were real excited about it, and they were following all the directions, had their goggles on. One student asked to go to the bathroom, and he didn't know who I was or why I was in there, and I said, "Come on, you got one more trial." He's like, "Oh yeah, let me do this one first." So he even opted not to go to the bathroom because he was like, "Oh, let me see what happens. I don't want to miss it." So I thought that was a real powerful thing that they were enjoying it. We did find out, I did talk to her about the stoppers. Mr. Riddle's class is having some problems with the stoppers popping off. Yeah. And Roxanne wanted me to mention, and we put this in the teacher tips, that you don't have to wash the bottles after every class. And I remember you doing that.
Yeah, I tried to rinse them out.
So you don't have to.
You're using the same stock solution, all the students are. That's why they can reuse. It's like you want them to try it more than once, and each group can do it 3 times.
No, I did that as they were doing it. I just tried to clean it out between class.
Yeah, you don't need to
It
because
seemed
it's
like
the
it
same
got real
stock
slippery,
solution.
I guess, the acid base.
Yeah,
It
when it's
slick,
wet.
and they
Right.
wouldn't stay in there.
So yeah, next time don't wash them until the end,
Yeah.
and that way they can have time to fully dry.
I gave my kids each group a paper towel, and I told them they just had to wipe off the stopper and then wipe
Then
off
try
the
again.
inside.
That works too. But
Just talk
I
about
mean, there's no need to.
Yeah.
The data that was there was consistent. It just wasn't as high as the other
It was
classes.
leaking out the side.
But if they notice that, that's okay, right? I mean, sometimes
Well,
those
it took
kind
us a
of.
minute to figure it out,
That's all right.
but we did.
Yeah, but yeah, that's just something, and then plus it saves a lot of time, especially when you're going from one class to the next class to the next.
And they were
class.
like finished and then the next class. It wasn't
Right, you
like
don't have
much
time,
time
right?
between,
No.
so it was
Yeah, so just something to think about.
good
Those,
learning.
just because of the material, those rubber stoppers, when they get wet, they get slipperier, and they don't do what they need to do on the bottle. So that's all. We should probably add that to the teacher tip.
Yeah, I'll make sure
Just
it's
make sure that we do that. And if you guys ever think of things or notice things, we should really add those as teacher tips. Even if to you they seem insignificant, they probably aren't.
I'll make that file. Right now it's a view only, I believe. So I'll make that file a can edit in there. So that way, if you come across something that we don't have to email me, then I have to then turn around. You can just add it right then in real time.
And so, for example, I'd like to say, you would add the one when they're doing 4.1, is that each group, it really would be beneficial for them to see all 4. That's really not a teacher tip, but I think that's really important for students to see. And again, it depends on your time, but, yep.
Another one, you guys may be aware of it, maybe in the tips already, but whenever they're working on investigation 4, when they are handling the glass jar and with the stopper in it, it's very important that they're not if they try to lower it into the water with the lip of the glass jar, because if you mess with that rubber stopper, it'll slip out a little bit sometimes.
Have to hold it by
and it'll make
But
the
do they use
water
glass
level.
jars for 4.1? Or I thought it was just 4.2.
Well, 4.2, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
You're way
Sorry.
ahead of me.
Yeah, I'm sorry. 4.2, yeah. When they're doing that, sometimes if they pull the stopper too much, it'll make the water level change.
Yeah.
So that's just something.
Yeah, Mr. Crawford and Mr. Smith were doing 4.2 today.
Speaking of that, where would you see us ideally at the end of the quarter, which is not that far from now?
Yeah, it's 2 weeks away.
Because according to the pacing guide, we have I'm just starting 4.1 tomorrow, but there's 2 more investigations that are supposed to be done.
We've been talking about that was a conversation that Roxanne and I had today, and I think I've had with some of you. It's don't worry about the pacing right now. We're more worried about the students getting the concept, and we can catch up later, where some of them aren't going to take as much time. The pacing guide again was done based on what FOSS says they should do. We had to add a whole bunch of stuff in, so I don't rush. That's the main thing. Don't do it just because you have to do it and you have to get through it. Make sure they understand the concept.
I think we have to keep in mind that the SOL hasn't changed. It's still the same. They're still responsible for the material that we've always had them responsible for.
And that's what we're getting at.
Yeah.
It's just in a different way now. Because we're combining SOLs as opposed to teaching them in isolation. So we're covering concepts that we maybe not normally have covered until later on. We're covering them now, so we don't have to do it according to the old pacing later on. But we were having that conversation, making sure that they understand what they're reading, what they're talking about, what they're actually seeing, as opposed to just a fun activity they're doing in class today.
Added on to that, I have my principal is making a CSA for the 9-week.
I've already talked to her about it.
Okay,
Mhm.
so she said she's going to be putting 5 and 7 on there.
I've already talked to her. I sent her an email saying that you should probably done before, maybe 5, but definitely 4.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, she copied me on that email too. I already talked to her.
Okay, thank you.
We don't have a CSA that HCS
Right.
has made.
Right.
It's like last year, we have a midterm.
Yeah.
And is the midterm gonna be similar to what we did last year, or?
No, it'll be
Completely different?
It'll be different. It'll be rewritten to match what we've done this year.
Okay. Well, then that leads me to another question. There were a lot of good questions on that.
No, I'm not saying it's going to be every question's going to be rewritten.
Oh, okay.
It'll just be taking out what we need to have covered, because it's not fair to have students to have topics that weren't covered
Right.
on the midterm,
Gotcha.
but it's also not fair to have things that weren't covered or that were not on last year's midterm not be on this year because we've covered it. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me.
Okay, thank you.
At least I knew what you were trying to say anyway, right?
It's been a long day.
It's nice.
Yesterday was a long day too. I had to teach the 5th grade FOSS PD. I did my first PD for FOSS by myself yesterday on stream tables, which is a concept we do not teach in middle school.
On what?
Stream tables,
Oh.
rocks,
Looking at
soil, rocks, and
erosion,
landforms.
deposition,
Yeah. It's with the new FOSS stuff for 5th grade. Yeah. All right. Well, today we are not going into investigation 5 because we feel like that we just had the meeting last week on investigation 4, and that's where people are either getting ready to start or in the middle of. So today I asked you guys to bring notebooks, just a random sampling of notebooks, and hopefully you did. If not, I know Mr. Crawford brought Mr. Smith's, so you can look at those. And yeah, Miss Hinshaw had brought Allison's. So we have enough. I think we have plenty of notebooks to look at. And I'm going to turn it over to Roxanne.
Great, okay, so here's the thought, is what we're going to do today, and hopefully, I see the notebooks, so everybody who has notebooks has put them out. I know, Mr. Crawford, you have yours in a bin, right? And so what we'll do is there a way that you can make sure that you know that you'll get yours back? Because the idea is we probably won't just look at yours, and we might be sharing each other's. So do you want like a sticky that you can tape on it so you know they're yours with your name on it somehow to identify them? What's that?
I'll just jot my name on it.
Okay.
You got Smith have his names on?
All of mine are.
Okay.
You know. Okay. I'm just so that you quickly can find yours.
The green one will be easy for you.
That would be very helpful. Yeah, like white labels.
Can I just give you like
I just meant for like in general, like for the class.
I just got it from Walmart.
Is that what you did? And just put it on there?
Yeah, you get
do
like
you want to just use these right
Oh,
now?
yeah, I was
just
just
to put
thinking
your
for the
name on
student.
it? Yeah, no, I'll sorry.
It's just a name tag.
Just a name tag.
I bought the mailing labels.
Oh yeah, mailing labels are good too.
That's
Yeah.
a great idea.
Look at that teacher tip that's just not.
Teacher tip, right? Just go ahead and do that.
Right here though.
The mailing label.
This is the first item on the one I was going to.
Another teacher tip that you guys might care for is that because they all might look the same, is you can just take a piece of duct tape, so different periods. So period 1 might be green, and so you know when students put things away, they're not always putting them where they belong, and so then they can't find their notebook, and they all look the same. So if you know period 1 is green, and kids just do it, just a thought. That was a quick way of knowing that it was in the wrong place, and they could find their notebook.
Yeah, I like that one.
So, something like that. But anyway, so today is about the notebook. And so first what we're going to do is, do we want to do the 1, 2, 3, 4? Or do we
yeah,
want
we
to
can
do
do
that? Okay. So here's what we were thinking is we were going to have you count off by 4. So 1, 2, not by 4s. Count off 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we've got 4 tables set up. So we'll have the 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s, kind of like that. So if we want to start here, you would be 1.
Mr. Riddle.
Mr.
One.
Riddle. Yep.
2,
4.
1,
2,
3,
4.
1, 2. Okay, so the 1s stay there, 2s here, 3s, and 4s here. And bring your notebooks, but again, we're gonna share.
We got you, Miss Poole.
And so
We
you
got
are
you.
right there. You don't even have to move. How's that?
Oh, got the cord.
Just about right now. I think.
Alright, you said notebooks on there?
No,
Well,
we're
we're
good.
We're
With
gonna
your-
need to share with others.
Co-teacher 6th grade class.
Oh.
So,
Do we bring our stuff? Is that what she's saying?
Right. You don't have
Do you guys have glue sticks? There were
Yeah.
pages falling out of one of
Yep.
these kids.
don't go. And by the way, chips. There is still candy and chips back in that box. Help yourself.
Exactly.
It's
That's great. So then again, this is when I
Before, another thing before I forget, I appreciate the ones that emailed me on how many copies you need for investigation 4.2. If you did not email me, don't worry because I can't think or count. When, say, Eaton said they needed 250, I made 250 copies thinking that was the best thing I could do, not remembering that there are 2 on one page. So I made a whole bunch of copies. They're all right here. You do have to count them out now because they were nice and neat. But we'll get that. Don't leave without them. There should be enough for everybody to have them, even if you did not email me how many you needed.
Thanks for the all. That was a big oops, right? 250. So you really have fun.
That was awesome. Yesterday, and after I was done. Kidding me.
You're like, I could have been done a half an hour ago.
No, he has stuff in the room.
Alright, so what we're going to do is, you guys did receive way back, and you should have these in your own personal notebooks that you've been using, like at the PDs. It shows you the 4 components of a science notebook, where it's the focusing the investigation, the data acquisition and organization, making sense of data, or I put sense making, and next step strategies. It would be, it's just a second. Yes, it is. Thank you. So you've got the 4 components. So the idea is we broke you into the 4 groups. So group 1 is going to look at focusing the investigation. So what you're going to do is you're going to become the experts on your group of what is the what of that part. So for example, focusing the investigation, group 1 is going to look at that. It starts on page 14, and you're going to be the expert of what is that component? What comprises that component? It also will talk about instructional practices to support the development of that. So you're going to become the experts on that. And each section is a few pages with the, if you can say, see, this is 14 to 16, 16 to 18. The sense-making people, so group 3, you got a little more involved, and obviously that's the meat of a notebook that we'll focus on. So what you're going to do is you're going to look at your pieces, or your component, and become the expert of that component, and then you can share what the what is of that component. And so one of the group members can come up here and add to it. The idea is you're going to give what we might call an elevator speech of that component piece, right? So it's just 30 seconds, a minute. If you need to go a minute and a half, that's fine. So you can summarize what that component piece is. Does that make sense? All right.
And you said it's...
You're 3. So you are the sense making. Okay. That one goes a little more, you guys have a little more to do there. Just because you can see there's a few more pages than everyone else, right? But I know you can handle that. Does that make sense? So where do you find that? At the edge of your tables are the pieces. These are also electronic, but I just have copies of these. So go ahead and dive into it so we can look at the different pieces of a notebook. And then we're going to move forward looking at your students. So go ahead. And if you need some help, Shannon and I are here to assist in those pieces. And then there's markers up here when you want to start. If you want to start adding some things to that poster, feel free.
Just to make sure that she got it, because I didn't get a response back.
So you may have
She sent it out.
Yes.
They have FYI with pacing is, I don't think, because it was based on a conversation her and I had earlier.
We did not put these
Right.
out.
But I wanted to make sure that it was fair.
I really appreciate it, because I was looking for, like, I've got 1 week, which means I have 3 classes, and I'm not going to be able to get through 3 investigations in 3 classes.
Just keep going.
You need
For investigation 4, though, I was looking to pre-test test. I'm supposed to be giving them the pre-test on Thursday and Friday. It is, but it's got questions about potential and kinetic energy, like on a roller coaster. And the kinetic energy we're looking at here is
If no one has given it, I can delete it.
Okay.
If somebody has given it, either just tell them this is a concept that's coming up.
Okay.
Think about a roller coaster. Where do you stop? Where do you have the most, like Busch Gardens? You know, bring that kind of.
So kind of just doing a quick lesson on that.
Just like in a pre, you shouldn't have to give anything because.
Yeah. No, but like in order for them to pass the post.
Technically, they had it in 6th grade.
Yeah.
They have that same exact question they've had.
I know they're not gonna remember.
I understand that, but
a quick lesson might help.
just in like a couple, like 2 minutes, yeah. Just say, but it is coming. That's going to the whole next, the next kids. It's all about that.
Okay.
But if no one has given it yet, then I can delete it. At least off the post.
Well, I was also thinking instead of if for this one you can't, I could do the eye check instead and do that pre-post maybe because I have some.
Is there a
copies
4?
of one.
Yeah.
I think there's one on 4. I didn't actually look. This is
1 and 2.
so I need to.
I think there's a 1 and 2 are together. I think 3 and 4 are by themselves.
Okay. Let me just double check because I want to make sure.
Those
I have something.
the eye checks can't be put into IA just because the nature of them being
Just the PDF.
well they and the
Right.
with the fill in the blank questions, if it's not typed in exactly how we type it in,
Yeah, like with the
It's gonna mark it
uppercase
wrong.
letters and stuff. Yeah,
Okay,
heat
so
on
let's
this one
spiral
is giving me
back.
problems.
Yeah.
Monicas aren't getting that filter right temperature. Is changing the
And
state.
some kids might pick it up like, my kid
Yeah.
got like, from the,
I'm not seeing an eye check.
they understand.
I'll just do the pre-post that you have and then
Okay.
see if I can.
and when as soon as I stop doing
Right.
this, I can check.
So
Thanks.
after they did the first one, like, oh, okay, and then the second, now they know that, okay, heat causes expansion and
Vaccine.
Then you can tie
Long
it to
term
the
resistance.
region, why they have expansion.
No, we've met. I've been to
Wait, yes, I know, I remember
Yeah,
that.
you were in
Right.
Right.
It needs to
talking
have
about my grandma doing
so
it.
temperature.
One time it opened
You're
the
facing
She was there last year with us.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Evidence to help support them.
Trains moved across the city.
Yeah, and it's exciting, you always
Well, you don't,
yeah.
I don't think you necessarily have to get to.
Where we were there.
I think she
Depends on where I'm at.
Yeah, makes sense.
That's
I feel
Time,
That big giant waiting table with all those
Yeah, I kind of broke
Well,
it
yeah,
down.
that's, yeah, that was a lot.
today.
Yeah.
But
today, they're not two.
not my fault.
I had to get with the And I don't think I started 9. But like I had
They
to
went
get
back.
it's That's a long day. But yeah,
Yeah, I didn't have my head on this.
That is exciting. They're not using
generating new questions.
anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
So we moved to someone
I mean, I have some, that would be a
Everybody else is just kind of.
I love it when
I think some people do.
Exactly what I do. Like,
Okay, so basically,
I don't think
write
everybody.
the application up
for
here,
them
it's
answering
things
their
that have
focus
made.
question, here are some supports to help
Go
break
back
it
and
down,
write things,
guide
so
them to,
I do any
so not
vocabulary at
just
the bottom of that
right,
page, and then
right.
after
To me, it
that.
seems like you're
it's
drawing
every kind of
break
thing
down
that
from
makes
making
like
a
you
lot
see
of
them
them.
for-
Supplement, so.
Yeah.
Student answer
Or the
it,
worksheet,
maybe
something like that.
Yeah, and I have kids that are trying to
just
do
don't know.
it.
See,
Well, and I have them like they
Did they do it?
actual labs,
Yeah.
and like I go through and I read the questions, like the whole page down, so I'll give them a page and they'll be able to look.
Yeah, and I try to tell mine that, but
I have been adding them in the investigation journal.
Right.
We've got, this stage in the classroom, they have their science notes.
They will.
he's very,
And
you know,
there's some
and
kids
I
though
have,
that can't do it.
I have them write it every year.
Oh, that's good, I like how you do it. Oh, so you
Yeah,
did,
I told
Henry?
Bigger because I didn't use
Diabetic
those.
John's take.
Yeah, I like to use
them,
them,
because there's this one
that
that keeps showing up that they keep getting wrong.
Yeah, so I just wrote it down.
He got, kids tell him to do something and then it's like,
Oh, I like that.
something that's, you know, 30 minutes.
Yeah, I think, well, you know, and I don't, I just look for, because he's the model that we went
Yeah,
over
he's the one
class,
we went over.
but I didn't do any of the other
They're
ones.
actually doing the stuff and
I like that.
Yeah.
they do it.
So
I go
then,
back.
See, I go through like
All
all three
of
actual labs.
mhm.
So I collect them like once a week.
Yeah.
See, for the labs, I'll choose a couple questions to grade for focus, and then the rest will be recourse, and then when I get to the focus question, I look to see, and I'll
We didn't
optimize
do the.
when I'm grading it, when I'm grading the focus question,
I'm gonna be.
You wanna add
You
that?
got this, you got this, you got this.
Oh,
Do you want to do
yeah.
district course or we want to
That's
like
all
that?
right.
So like this page there, these pages of the entire
Oh,
vacation.
you're talking
For me, so like,
They make more
Power,
sense.
power teachers. Yeah, I don't care.
so this plus this,
No,
instead of just listening at one together, makes one to say. So they, I only created 3 on this.
I did that.
Yeah, full charge.
I
And
think
it's 3
I'm
days,
for
they
this,
just said.
for the lab.
And they got a half because they yeah. So it's only 10 points, but in the
Just give
end,
them a few minutes.
It does add up.
they're
So
great
they
out time, yeah.
might be at a place.
That's how I did it.
These guys might not be.
And that's,
So based on becoming the experts on your section, how much more time do you think you need as a group?
these are just the sports, right? Do you want us to write it on there?
Or else I can. If you want to go ahead and do that and save me. So if a reporter wants to come up, there's markers there, and we can do that. Or I can capture.
Say something about
Does- Well, I can't say mine's the best, but I hear you. All right. So does it sound like we're ready to share?
You wanna talk to me?
Talk out.
Okay, starting with group 1, focusing the investigation. How would you summarize your part of the 4 components? Who wants to summarize focusing the investigation for you?
Focusing the investigation is pretty much just ensuring that the kids actually understand what exactly the end game is, I would say. To me, the question is like don't write all this.
I'm not.
The question is like overarching, so I think if it's answered using all those vocabulary terms that we discussed during the lab, if it's answered in completion, then it's gonna open up more questions and more opportunities to dig even a little more deeper into the content.
Does anybody else in your group want to add to that?
I think we kind of all agreed with that.
I think you just give the students and teach something to focus on, you know,
Okay.
what is the reason for this lab and why are we completing it?
All right, how about the second one? Data acquisition and organization.
Hold on a sec. Oh, she's signing in.
Oh,
What we were thinking is, this is kind of your drawings, like, okay, this is what we've seen, like the 4.2 where you draw the picture of the bottle with the balloon. And your charts, your pie charts, your flow charts, like your Venn diagrams and everything, this is when you're taking what you're seeing and putting some organization to it. You know, making it usable for the children. And also concept maps. So they can sort of make drawing connections back to previous words and things that they've used. I don't know, it came with it.
That's mine. Yeah, just keep passing.
all right, how about the sense-making component?
So the sense making is kind of like at the end of the investigation when they're actually answering their focus question. I think a lot of students who get it have a hard time putting it down to answer the focus question. Like even though they know it, they have a hard time putting it on paper. So this basically provides a bunch of support to those students. So breaking it down, and I always do this just right before I have them answer the focus question. I take 10 minutes and I say, okay, let's just do the spiel, go over this because the support's like the vocabulary, data analysis, graphic organizers, giving kids a chance to, and I think most importantly, framing their response. So like those sentence structures that they have up there, a lot of those kids struggle with. So giving them that frame of how you should be responding to the focus question, like a claims and evidence kind of thing, to help support them in answering their focus question is what this is.
And I'm glad you mentioned those. So like with all of them, there are instructional strategies that you can use. And this one is probably going to be one of the, I don't want to say toughest, but it may not look the same for every student, right? So this is where you may have to do, as a teacher, more differentiation than you probably will in here or here. But we can talk about this one too. This one's pretty, just kind of right there, right? Starts the investigation, it focuses the investigation. All right, how about next steps?
So this one focuses on where you can go after like additional information. Some of the different strategies I have in here, like the line of learning, where once they've written what they think is the focus question, they can draw a line, they can turn and talk and see if there's anything additional that they want to add to their answer that maybe someone else had. Or you can provide additional information on the topic for them. So line of learning, across, they draw a line across and then add new information underneath. They also said like the traffic light was another strategy where you can do red, yellow, and green on different topics, and then as a teacher you can go through the notebook and see whether yellow or red, and then be able to fix that.
And so let me ask you, are the next step strategies only for students, or is it also? Okay.
I would say probably the teachers as well. Making sure the teachers look into the notebooks and making sure that they understand what we're doing, not just nodding.
Okay, right, exactly. And so this can be for both areas. All right, so kind of having just an idea of what the 4 components are. So that's the what. Now what we're going to ask you to do is at your table, you notice you've got 4 different colors. So what you're going to do is just kind of quickly go through the student notebooks that you have at your table. If you don't have that many, we're going to make sure that each group, or excuse me, each table has several, because we want you to be able to go through more than 1 or 2. The idea is we're going to choose investigation 3.1. We're going to start there. Has everybody done investigation 3.1? So
We're on it right now.
you're on it right now. All right. Have you started 3.1?
Just started.
Okay. So do you have any in your notebooks? How many
They
notebooks
just have the.
did you bring? How many notebooks did
I
you
only
bring?
have one.
Okay, so then we're gonna be okay. So then with the other notebooks, and like I said, we may wanna move some notebooks around. So here's what we're going to do is, with the notebooks, you're going to do is, if you see the focusing the investigation, you're just gonna put a bright pink tab where you find it in that notebook, so we can see it. If you see a data acquisition part, you're going to put green. If you see a sense-making part, you're going to put yellow. And if you see a next step strategy or strategies, you're going to put a blue. So the idea is we're just going to try to identify, only using investigation 3.1 currently, with the notebooks that you have. Does that make sense? So you just want to look through each student's notebook, 3.1, and just identify and see if you see those 4 different components of a notebook. And you may not. So don't force the colors. Don't force finding them. If you don't see it, you don't see it. It's okay. This is the idea is we're just trying to recognize the 4 parts or the 4 components of a notebook. Does that make sense? And if you need some clarification, we kind of went through this quickly, but this should just be, what's the focus? You're probably going to find the focus question there. There may be something a little bit sooner, because not all investigations start with a focus question, as you know. This one is, what kind of data do they have? It could be in the form of a drawing, a chart, something. Maybe it's a student notebook sheet. So a student notebook sheet does not necessarily mean that they made sense of it, but it could have sense making on it. So just take your time and go through it and ask questions and talk with your group there. So you don't have to be currently correct. Like, I mean, you might have a question, you can talk with your groups and say, I'm not really sure. So the idea is we just kind of want to think it out.
Question, you know, from the hand, they plug their data and answer questions, and they should be doing the same.
Not necessarily, nope, not necessarily. So you just gotta make sure that they are, so if you could just make sure that you can see the, like, so nope, they don't have to be. So the making sense is they're actually responding to that focus question, they're actually answering it using their data, using the academic language. So maybe they responded, but they didn't make sense. There's a difference. It's that and my.
I mean, but in theory, let's say you got a student that's on top of
and then.
The name of tried to make it.
Not necessarily.
Do you mind joining this table or that
So
table?
maybe that student.
Yeah.
The way they have three.
This one.
Okay, so you go.
Oh, hey.
I'm not here to disagree with.
Oh, I understand what you're saying, I'm just, I wanna make sure, because, you know.
Yeah, and if you want, right, this is just learning, all right? So all you want to do is, again, we're only looking at investigation 3.1 on each of the notebooks. We're gonna start there. Just 3.1. We just want to start there.
You have to read to make sure they got it.
Right.
Yeah, you're right, Mr. Crawford. You've got to read
But
what
I
they
mean,
responded.
I see what you're saying.
Right? So they may not have made sense.
In theory,
They may
that's
have
what it's
written
for, but they might have not wrote down that date.
Exactly. That's okay, right? We are not, we're just, all you're doing here is just finding the components if they exist. That's it.
How much gas? Okay.
And go through each notebook.
3.1,
each notebook, 3.1.
Sorry. It was wonderful. I was like, so this was not stop. So anyway, I think this is I only brought one. Adding information to it, right?
Respond to
Yeah, so adding information, and again, they may not have next step strategies, right? It's
Well,
okay.
Well, I kind of forced them to take notes.
Here is
I'm working with you there.
the data.
There's nothing said that that's not okay. So 3.1, there's several things, so we don't want to just capture the, just the demo, right? It was the demo and then do they do the syringes? No, 3.1 is where they do the collecting the amount of,
Yeah, the gas release.
the gas
Would be
release,
that
thank you.
first cut with data and then.
That goes to 3.2 now, I think, that one, right?
Are we only
Yeah, like
doing
We're only
this.
doing 3.1. You are overachieving. And then just, so then look at each notebook to see if they do that.
Oh, 3.1.
So that's
Just 3.1 for each notebook. And again, it doesn't mean you're gonna find all 4.
Yeah, this job.
And I don't understand.
No, I grabbed a couple of that ones actually.
Making sure that in it, are they using the academic language, are they?
Not one.
But if you say mean, they might know.
That not
They talk about
necessarily
it
is
in math.
answering the
Is
focus.
that what the disconnect is?
Probably all.
If you say mean, they don't know that.
Okay.
Mean,
And
Okay.
then
they
based
talk about it in math.
And see, in the class lab,
Response
we got-
sheet incorporated into the notebook.
Yeah, they use-
Written
go
work
mean,
on
mean.
I got you.
Compare and share discussion, think and share. Whole class read. Key points for
How can they actually incorporate?
Well, they look good.
Okay.
line of learning.
So,
Does it? Good job on my I have like even since it was
Traffic lights, I see key points.
Zoom.
Y'all write down?
But then there's, I like how you have it, but they're not using.
So I don't
data,
understand
so like some of those are
Yeah,
just
I
things
don't
that we're
think
starting
a lot of them, but like this one.
We're not, we're just, right now, we're just trying to identify the parts, and then we're gonna get to the very back.
You know what? I remember never getting.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I don't do that. I should get power for it, but.
I thought that was more.
I was supposed to just
of
be
a
an
type
index too,
thing.
like
Maybe I'm.
literally just supposed to be write the words, but I was like, no, I forgot.
Oh, I hate those kinds.
Do you know what you're
You gotta go back, I mean, they are a part of the Sorry about that, not to make it hard.
Maybe switch up.
So if they're not making sense, then you don't wanna mark the yellow, but if they are.
Yeah, I mean, y'all are doing that by experience, right?
Whole class discussion.
I do not have that. My
Not
my
much
lunch
of
meeting
it is
is
what
like
it
that.
is.
We were busy that day.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Struggle
I see exactly what you're saying.
You got it.
Right.
We wrote it
That
down.
was something,
Putting the elements up there, they got that from me. And then figuring out the carbon dioxide.
And they probably don't, and I think we.
Well, I know.
I just.
What's your plan?
Yeah.
Okay, cause I told her it was carbon dioxide,
Right,
but I was
because-
just trying to figure out.
Yeah, so like they should be able to get that. staff, right?
Yeah, they got that.
Because they had that already.
Right.
Investigation.
Yeah, they want to
Well, then maybe that's something you would have
I
to
only have
go
to
back
write the
to
number on
and
the
find
front.
it. Because it is
Yeah, I did.
listed.
I did.
And that's
And I
okay.
say on the back of this,
Yeah, that's
this is still 13, this is 13 and this is back.
But yeah, no, so that's just what I
It
did not occur to me.
I
until
wouldn't
started
know.
seeing it, and I saw yours.
Yeah.
Front back.
Do you think that gas would
I
have
still
to
do
be
that,
on?
and so a lot of people are
Probably
like,
not, right? Because
It's
why?
this
Because it's
13
on the
and
left
this is
side.
13 and this is
Yeah.
13 and this is 15.
So
I'm
some
like,
of those kinds of things.
Yeah, we talked about all those.
Yeah,
As
long
long
as
as
it's
both to
We're
them.
sticking to this
Go
now,
for this one,
and
this one, I
started
did.
getting colors and do that.
Yeah, but I did
It's
do
okay.
Well, the reason is
Right.
because then that, no, because then that uses
Going to Yorktown, actually, end up doing that.
well, it starts the conversation. Well, one is a gas, the other thing is then it starts talking about eliminating reaction, right? Because you do, it's
Oh, so this is
all of the, all of it was
part
so, yeah.
It was in
They
that
should-
book.
they probably do not know.
Investigation calendar.
I think it's
There was a supplemental book.
No, just 3.1 and then.
Yeah, we're just gonna, because you wanna go through each of the, investigations. Each of the notebooks.
Picture and underline for both.
And you can work with each other if you're not sure. This is not, supposed to be a task that. We do wanna make sure we get through each notebook that numbers on.
Oh, keep
And only 3.1.
That's new for me.
So, and then, so share the notebook. You don't have to do all your own. Thank you, I appreciate that. It's not really supposed to be the work, it's supposed to be helping identify.
I just will talk to him about it.
This was his last week,
Right.
and it was only worth 4 points, so I took 3.5 off. Because this, he got a point. This, he got a point. This, he got a point for doing. And then, tell me about it.
That's how I just added that because it was in that flow.
I have a feeling like
For this right here, so I can put
No,
that
but I don't want to do their grade either. So like the 6.5 out of 10, even though that's all I got for actual expression, because I was able to give him credit for all the other stuff.
considering
Considering I do expression sucks, I still
You
gave him
got yellow?
credit. I said,
You
good
guys have
job.
extra yellow on your next one?
Yes.
I had one focus question and she didn't answer. I have to go back
Oh,
and
you
read
got
it.
yellow.
Are you joking?
She didn't, but like she didn't bother me.
Oh, green.
No, I am
You got
very-
yellow, sorry.
No, you don't be sorry, it's okay.
I'm sure your mom probably didn't answer.
I know what it is.
Well, here, what colors do you need? I just started cutting.
He did 4 of his 5 questions for this.
This, yeah,
I had
I
to write one, we got more. I just started cutting.
That was a better idea than trying to have them swap them together.
Yeah, and then they were like,
Because
why can't we write it here? Why can't we write it
this
here?
didn't take that long. And so I was like, it's gonna be a good time
See it. I'm
to talk
probably gonna
about
do even numbers and grade those.
and have some run it back into a little, that he has some pretty good topic about color.
I need to look up what my kids are absent, because these kids didn't.
Okay. So I just wanna, check and make sure, so like what we're doing is we're marking the notebooks and finding those components. And so here, this is the focus question, but then there's no sense.
Okay.
We're not
You
gonna
didn't
mark
write a focus question on the
Okay.
front
right,
of
does
that?
that make sense?
Yeah.
All we're doing is identifying the 4 components, and you may not find the 4 components, and that's perfectly okay. Does that make sense? Yep,
Oh, that's
it's perfectly, probably
We miss you, Kim.
exactly what's gonna take place, so. Is it clear, because I don't know if I was clear.
No, that got it.
Okay.
So you said.
Good.
Yeah. She makes a great These are Miss Tucker's, so these are mine. Which means. I'm pretty sure the first email said.
I'm gonna go back to
And I'm
my
like,
He was 6.
Yeah, he good.
It's not horrible.
He just keeps
I
going.
have television study. You might not know what behind the veil looks like right now. Based on these things, that's why I put them random. But whatever, at least you know.
You were 6.
See a chemical reaction to a chemical property of bubbling that they they weigh the rock that is a gas chocolate.
Already?
They
I didn't want to say that.
Like,
6, 7.
Very.
And then I was when they came to 6. And then I didn't get here.
That's good. I like it. She has a picture. Yeah, but this is.
Well, then science-wise,
I love science. I just started doing that.
But you do.
I know some
What is the
people
next
are-
step?
Does anyone need any more flags or sticky notes? Another color?
Well, I can cut some more.
Yeah.
So what do you mean by next step?
Start using stuff.
I'm just using mine for
So you would do a line of learning.
Oh, that's one.
They already.
Those are only minimal.
Okay.
Lots of other sites.
Based on their.
You guys got through your notebooks?
It's yeah, it was sent out. It's in my learning plan. It's on the.
that's what we were talking about.
Okay, and let's do this.
We weren't sure
Okay.
exactly what a next step was, because when I read it over, it looked like it could be a more of a
In my learning plan
discussion,
too.
or like a group conversation, a shared
I would
reading.
do one with bubble solution.
So we were wondering
I want to do with balloon. So if you got 4
exactly
people,
what it would
hey,
be,
you two gonna do one
Yeah,
with
and
the
that's,
balloon.
so I think we should discuss that, right?
or if it could be something that could be found in a notebook.
Periodic table is ordered by groups and periods.
This kid right here, spend half the year for all his stuff.
Find it like that. That's making it doesn't go in there. This is neutron.
I think they're getting out of it.
That's why I'm so
The next focus question is
What's your focus? How can we use the words that
I want to see that because I told you.
That's it. So that's all I'm saying. Like,
Yeah, maybe not.
the overall concept.
She didn't make any changes to it, did she?
Looks like how much
I do everything.
should be one page over.
You haven't made any changes to our schedule for the year, have you?
The only change we talked about last time was
Air matters, air has
staying for Halloween, October 31st.
I've got that on my
Yeah,
schedule.
that was
Yeah.
the only change that. Okay. Yeah. Because we have to go. They're coming in.
Where are you guys?
downtown.
How is, you guys still have some notebooks to go through?
It's not within the division, so it's harder to change.
Do you want,
I mean, you gotta
okay, you've already gone through these?
verbally.
Perfect. Do you mind if I just review
Yeah,
what
I'm trying to figure out.
Oh, part 2. That's okay, no big deal.
Cause we haven't. I put, cause we had, that's why I put like the blue there, because we did talk about it in the group, but it wasn't like written down.
Are you on
Okay,
the
another new thing, and then.
So it's this page here.
Yeah, and then
The CD calendar. Okay, there we go.
Okay, then I scrolled down, I keep hitting.
So you did you go over this part right
It's
here?
okay, don't, we're not using it, we're just trying
Okay, so
to see and identify.
For the year.
It says
First language, yeah.
2016.
So that's it, we just have to look at it each 1 month at a time, and we'll see everybody's. Is there a way to see just ours, or you have to scroll?
So you guys were able to get through all of yours?
Alright, can I, if you go to my learning plan, you should be able to see it that way.
This right here?
That, we don't manage that site.
But that was
The
just
calendar,
like-
I sent Kate all those dates,
It's
and
one-
she I don't know how she can organize or shuffle it.
I'm just trying to get away to, no, it'll be next, the following.
We're looking at first.
That's why I'm struggling with.
So we just wanna make sure we're low. Not that they wouldn't have done it over
First,
Supplemented out with plan.
Do you want a website?
What, November first, did you guys have
Oh,
that?
this is actually.
It doesn't change, the next one is November first.
Right now, I seriously feel like I'm kind of going, oh, there's some names. Yeah, you're
But it's solid gas.
It's there now.
Actually,
That
it was
wasn't
free in
there.
October.
It's kind of weird.
Now, do you guys, do you mind again if I borrow this? I don't know what happened
Go
to
right
my
ahead.
investigation guy. Alright, so if we're looking at, are you guys at a place where you think you've got through all yours? Okay.
Yeah, my, yeah, this one.
Okay.
I wouldn't really do appreciate it.
That,
Roxanne,
yes.
are they able to do those, or is that?
Do you want them? We have them electronic, but if you want them, I'm right there with you, so take it. If you don't want it, and you think you're just gonna take it and stash it away, just leave it here, cause I'll take them back. So, but if you think you want them, they're in your books, they're in the floppy books, they're also electronic. Alright, so let's come back as a group. And here's what we're gonna do. This is just gonna be quick. And again, the idea is first, what you did was you identified the different parts, and some of them, I think we still have some conversation that needs to happen. I from what I heard, some people had some questions or weren't sure on some things. And so what I'd like to do is, the reason for the madness of the different colors is so you can quickly begin to look at notebooks. So, and I'm just choosing them randomly, right? So we don't know whose they are, and it's not a purpose of whose they are. That's not the point of this exercise. So if we look at these, the idea here is this should be a quick little show and tell. We see the focus, the investigation is happening. Right? That's good. That's exactly what needs to happen. We need to focus that investigation. Students are starting to collect data, and oftentimes the student notebook sheet is a good reference and a good source for that data to start being collected. We might want to think of other ways for that to happen. This yellow piece, this is the key to students actually having that understanding. So we might know that in the moment they have the understanding. In the moment they can answer and say a question or answer a question. But the sense-making piece, those are the yellows, all right? And that's normally, almost always, the places where we as students and as teachers need to work with helping students to be successful in this area. You can have this and you can have that, and those are great starts, right? Because if you don't at least have those things and students aren't learning, this is hard for 8th graders. Well, this is just hard for middle schools. To collect data, to know what data to collect, and then to organize it. And like I said, oftentimes the student notebook sheets are fantastic places for that to happen. This is where we want to get to. So the question becomes, and then this, so the question becomes, this is the what. And if we want to get to this what, how do we do that? What do we need to do as teachers, as students, to get to this sense-making piece? So you can just clearly, we could tally, the purpose isn't for that. I think you can visually see that here's the piece we really want to make sure we're getting to. And there are some students where we're not getting here, and I've heard conversations is, I don't know what to do for this student, right? We probably all have that student, right? Because I know when we initially started this, it was bring a high, medium, and low. Well, what does a high, medium, and low mean? Like, I don't know that I could decide what a high, medium, and low is right now with a notebook. So my understanding is, you just randomly pick it. So I want to focus on this and this. Not that we shouldn't focus on this, but this is the key. How do we get from these whats to the how? What are the things that we can do to get students here? What are some strategies? What are some things that we can do? And I know, Mr. Crawford, you have something to add.
It wasn't actually about sense making,
Okay.
it was next step strategy.
Okay.
Would going over scientific investigation, would that be considered next step? Because there are opportunities to discuss independent, dependent variables in some of these activities. So would that be considered next step, although the focus question doesn't directly address it?
No. So adding a new content piece, like independent and dependent variable, is not a next step strategy, right? A next step strategy, who are the people on the experts of the next step strategy, is really, you're looking at the sense-making piece, and if they're not making sense to the extent that you want, and one of the things we can think about is what seems like good making sense, especially at a year one, right? As you get better with this, as students get better with this, you should see this piece and this piece just keep going better. Like even when you do the second and third modules, it should get better. But for right now, where you are right now, what are some things that we can do to get to that point?
Create high-level questions, critical thinking, open-ended questions.
Okay, so one of them is through questioning. Another one, have any of you tried doing, I did notice it a couple times in a few of the classrooms that I was going in, especially when, if you could all, I know you kind of gave up the note, this piece.
Would you try to relate it to a frame of reference they have, like something in the real world, make connections?
It certainly can, but some of the areas that you're looking when you're making sense is some of the things what do you envision, how do you know, I guess a couple things. How do you know that in 3.1, what was the content that was supposed to be coming out in that investigation? If you guys do have your investigation guides, if not, let me pull it out.
Chemical properties, what are reactivity?
Let me just get that, and I've got your investigation guide again, I appreciate that.
Gases, particles,
Alright, so some of the things that you're, say that again, with gases, particles?
Gases and particles.
Alright. So it was the one, if you want to recall, it's the one where they capture the gas, they capture it in the syringes, they do the, I'm gonna look at it with you. They do they capture the gas, so there is a big data piece there where they captured that gas, alright? But let's go to the question on this one.
How can the gas produced in a chemical reaction be studied?
Right.
That's the question.
Okay, and so what are some of the things that that they looked at? So they started with the demo, right? And I don't know that, some of them investigations are better, if you will, at making sense than maybe some others, just like pulling independent and dependent variable. Not all investigations lend themselves. Once you have an understanding of that, you as a teacher can figure out, but they're not always as evident for students. So those are usually brought out in investigations that are better. And this one, go ahead. No, go ahead.
A question I got was like, this one, 3.1, what is a chemical reaction?
That's what students ask? Okay.
So I felt like that was a good opportunity, not to go real deep into chemical reactions, just to show them products and reactants. So I did talk about products and reactants in the investigation, and they were able to understand the gas was produced, and the citric acid and the baking soda were the reactants.
Okay, produced.
And so I just touched that and told them to put that in their little bank, and we'll talk about it later on that one.
Okay. What do others think? Because what was happening in there? In the demo, what did you do?
You measured the amount of gas with the syringe.
Not in the demo, right, but in
the balloon?
Yeah.
But chemical reaction.
Right, you do. They should know that there was a chemical reaction, right? And that something produced.
And I let them touch the bottom, so how cool it was.
Okay.
You knew the reaction was.
So so anytime you can go back, because they've already should know what a chemical reaction is, they should have seen that that's all what investigation 1 is about. And so they're going back, noticing that there's a chemical reaction, and this time they're taking that chemical reaction and showing that gas that's produced, but they're quantifying that gas, right? So I think maybe we cut you off.
I had someone at home with vinegar and baking soda and tried to replicate it.
You had a student?
Well, I told them it was acetic acid with vinegar, and I guess they figured they could mix it with a base. Yeah, so I thought it was pretty cool.
Okay. So going back, so what are some things to get them to get to those sense-making pieces? And anytime you can go back to what they've already done, you can't go wrong on that, right? Because that's just gonna solidify what a chemical reaction is. More times they hear it, or really the more they talk about it, right?
I think we get caught up in trying to get the labs done and completed.
Hold on, guys. We got Mr. Ken, or Mr. Ken, Mr. Riddle
really
is
going back to the focus question. It's like, you know, so we got to get this done and then this one done, and don't really think about, you know, how important it is to get back to that focus question and really explain the data and how they got it and what it is that we acquired. I know for me that would be very helpful.
Okay. And so, what are ways that? Go ahead.
Give them real life examples and saying why this is work this way.
Kind of did that.
I mean that's the clear cut thinking that if I give them a real life example, why does this work? From what we learned from the investigations, they should be able to say, because of so and so, because the particles, you know, when the two mix, they pushed back on the plunger, therefore because there was a gas produced, or whatever it may be. It could be some, I don't know, example you would use for that. Piston in a car, whatever, I don't know. Explode.
About rides at Busch Gardens. There are a lot of pressurized rides, and I told them you can hear it. You know, like I use a little Dragonland ride.
I used to drop the 2 liter. If you drop a 2 liter on the floor and open it, what's coming out? You know, what's pushing everything right out all over you real quick? You know, why do we wait for a minute?
What about a tire gauge, you know, that has a little thing that
Talked about that, how you can measure the tire pressure, but how do you measure the balloon? And that's where I'm kind of trying to make that connection with the balloon. So they understood the CO2, you know, and the carbonation. And if you leave the lid off, what happens to the gas overnight? And, you know, the soda's flat and somebody's yelling at you in the morning. Trying to make those connections. Would that be what you mean by like sense making, trying to?
Well, part of sense making is tying it to their understanding of what happened, but also think about, let's look at the data. What kind of data did they collect in this?
Right.
What kind of data did
Quantitative
they collect?
data.
Quantitative data, right? And they also had to, which it looks like students did an average, which for some students, that's not an easy feat to do, right? And then also looking at some of the things that they could look at is error. I noticed in one group, their first time they did it, they got 0. For whatever reason. Who knows, right? It maybe the plunger wasn't on, or the syringe wasn't on right. And then they had 2 other sets of data. So bringing out that experimental error. You know, why? Why did that happen? Or for yours, you know, you had issues with the
They were
stopper
popping out.
staying on.
Yeah, it was popping out.
And so when they're looking at and collecting that data, would they use that 0 to make an average? So if you had a 0 and a 20 and a 24, but it looked like they may have used that in there. And so it might be some kind of a conversation. So that part of that. But then the other thing is you want to lead to, because then the next one is the air particles. So what? Why did the syringe go up? So we want to not only talk about that we know there was air, and air takes up space because the plunger went up, but exactly tying it into there. But so why? Why did the plunger go up? We know it went up, but bringing in the why, right? Why did it go up?
Yeah, I think they got with the bubbling and the gas. I think we ran into the problem with the average, and Mr. Crawford was saying that they're taught mean instead of average.
Then use the
So
word mean.
that's a word that, you know, that would have been helpful for me. I'm using average, and a lot of them are saying, what's an average? And then made that connection with the math that, you know, they use the word mean instead with it. You know, it wasn't all of them, it was just a few, you know.
Right,
That
no,
would have
that's,
been very helpful.
yeah, and that's unfortunate when we use one piece of language in one class.
Find a variable and
Right. All right, so what are some other things on getting to that sense-making piece? So what would you consider to be a good response to this focus question? What would you think would be a good response to this focus question? Looking at for those of you who have the investigation guide and the go ahead, Mr. Pumper.
To me, using the vocabulary accurately is a good response to the focus question. And something you said, I think last time we were here, every kid may not be able to use all the vocabulary, so it kind of has that level of differentiation there. But of course, you want to see them use as much of the discussed vocabulary as possible. And those are your, I guess, your better answers. And you know, if they can only use 2 of the vocabulary, as long as they're using it accurately and making sense with it, then that's a good response too.
And keep hitting it. Yeah. Every time we talk about it, we use the word effervescent. You know, they say bubble, say, what's another word we use for bubble and fit?
That's true.
You know, just trying to keep spiraling back to it.
Well, with the investigation 4.2 and 4.1.
Let me think about that. One's the liquid,
The kinetic,
the thermometer.
Some of them had trouble with kinetic energy and how that applied to it. But they all pretty much got that thermal energy. They know what thermal energy, they were able to use that appropriately, and contract and expand. They were able to use that appropriately. And they were able to understand the relationship between thermal energy and expansion and contraction. So that was the big nugget from that investigation for me, that they were able to take away from it. And you know, the kinetic energy piece is going to take a little bit more explaining, or more diagrams, I would say, after that.
Yeah, and go ahead.
For this focus question for 3.1, since it asked how can the gas produced in a chemical reaction be studied, one of the things I looked for on top of all that vocab was that they understood that we used a syringe instead of a balloon, because that would show us a measurement, an actual number of how much gas in milliliters was produced, the volume of gas that was produced in the chemical reaction. So that's kind of one of the things I focused in on.
I noticed that in yours, on that one person's response.
Yeah,
right. Yeah, no, but that's okay. So like that is a good one. And so what are the things that we need to do or scaffold? Because again, going back and looking at those notebooks, we don't see as much yellow. So we want to have the yellow because then we know that they are actually making sense of that data. And so what is it that we can start thinking about and doing to get students to do that? So for example, why don't you share with us maybe something you did as a teacher to get students to be able to get to that making sense piece?
So for that one, I just focused in on, I kind of spent, you know, I give a spiel just before they do their focus question. What do we need to focus on? And I have on the board all the vocab. And I have, okay, I'm going to underline and check that you got this vocab. And I'm going to underline and check that you got this concept. So I basically go over with them. You need to make sure you include in there why we used the syringe instead of blue. What did we use to actually get that number? How did we, I just kind of went over it with class before we got started to make sure they understood. Because I know they know it. I think it's putting it down onto paper that they struggle with. So if I go through it with them real quick and say, I'm expecting to see this, this, and this somewhere in there in a way that makes sense, usually they will.
And
I was going to say, and again, this is investigation 3. So just think, by the time they're getting to the next, you know, Christmas break will be another break, you know, another 4 or 5 more investigations. And we get to the next kit where they're doing another one. By the end of it, you might not have to go do those little baby steps.
Yeah.
So it'll move, again, that'll be another time where it'll move a little faster too, because they're going to be used to the conversation. Not just to throw this monkey wrench in it too. We've already talked about next year not starting with chemical interactions. I know in the past we've always, you know, Kansas City Schools, as long as I've known, always done chemical interactions or periodic table, all that stuff first. But this might not be the easiest form or way to get these concepts and these little strategies going. So maybe starting with another module, another kit first, and then going into chemical interactions second. So they already have these practices in play. That's a conversation that I had with Roxanne and Benicia about which one would be the best to start with.
So would you say then this is one of the tougher kits of the 4?
I wouldn't say, I mean, well, some of the concepts are really tough.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, understanding, like for us, air particles, because here, everything you're understanding is about energy and energy transfer at the particle level. which is really hard. Why? Because you can't see it. Well, but the thing is, we make it visible through like the syringes. So something's happening in there, and they're believing us that it is air, right, which is a gas, because the syringe is going up. And then what happens is that's why they spend so much time on compression and expansion, that there's something in there and it is air, and then now we can quantify it in a reaction because we already knew it was a gas because we learned about that in investigation 1. Then when you get into investigation 5, you're going to add kinetic energy to those particles and kinetic energy transfer, which is just a tough concept. So if you think about it, and kids might be able to, again, in the moment regurgitate that, but like, let's look at investigation 3.1, 4.1, right? They look at what happens in hot water, and please remind me, and cold water, and they look at it. Now what they have to do in 5 is, what do you think will happen when you take hot and cold water and mix it? So for example, that seems very intuitive to us, and you want to know what the final temperature is. So when you have something like that, you've got, say, 100 milliliters of water at 20 degrees Celsius, which is room temperature, and then 100 milliliters of water at 80 degrees Celsius. If you take both of them and put them together, what would the final temperature be? And you can ask kids to predict. What could you imagine kids do? They might average them, right? They might say 20 plus 80 equals 100, and you come up with 50. All right? Or what else might they do? You got 20 degrees, which is room temperature, 20 degrees, which is hot. They might say 100 minus 20, and you get 60. Or they might say something like 20 plus 80, it'll go to 100. You may not get as many that say that, but that's their reasoning. Why? Because they have no clue what energy transfer is, and they're only relating numbers like they do in math. That's why they might average them. Makes sense, right? So that becomes really, really, really hard for them, because now you got energy transfer. So you had those particles, now we're adding vectors to those particles, and something's going on in that water, and it's not going to be the same temperature, and that temperature that's going to happen is really hard for kids to understand. The why. Then they're gonna figure it out, and they can measure with a thermometer, and that's easy. That's collecting data, but the problem becomes the why. So let me just say, that's why the better we can start getting to that sense making, and that's really hard. There's no doubt about it. The data acquisition, and you have the kids that can figure it out, because there is a formula that they use in the change in temperature, and a lot of kids, I won't say a lot, there will be many kids who can do that, and you think they have it, but the why piece on that energy transfer, that's really, really, really hard. Like, really hard. That it takes time after time. So maybe something to think about is when you're looking at that sense making, I know this was brought up some time ago, this might be a really nice strategy, and so maybe just choosing one strategy. So for example, that's the focus question. What was it about? What were some of the points? And what are some of the details? Because, gosh, I'm sorry, tell me your name. I know. Mandy, I'm so sorry. I don't have all your names, and I apologize for that. I'm also trying to learn the 5th grade and 4th grade teacher, so it's not working. But anyway, so then because they can do it, they can do the investigation, they can collect the data, they can write the numbers down. What they have trouble doing is the why and putting it in a response. Why? Because that's difficult to do. They're 8th grade, but we can get them there, because other thing is they need to have that conversation among each other, because once you do and you talk, then you can write. If we're not allowing them to talk among each other, then the writing even becomes more difficult. So they've got to have that conversation. So you've got to ask them, well, why do you think it went up? Or like, when they were doing the thermometer today in 4.2, well, why do you think it went up? Not because it was hot water. I mean, that was part of it, but what happened, you got to keep bringing them to that particle level, and if we're not bringing them there, they just know that the thermometer would go up if the water's hot. Go ahead, sorry.
And a lot of the questions now on the SEL test are not the knowledge, remembering kind of questions. They're having them have to look at a diagram or read something and make sense of what they're reading or what they're seeing in a picture, and then answer the question. So it might not be having them. They might not have to actually write, which is what we're asking them to do in these investigations. Write what they found out. Write the answer to the focus question. But if they can write, no matter what question is thrown at them on an SOL test, meaning whatever content it is, they're going to be able to answer it because they understand the concept, as opposed to just being able to spit a fact back out.
Where it really helps is with the, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, say it. No, I'm sure everyone wants to hear it. It's good.
So not to mention helping the writing.
Right. Oh,
overall in the district.
Absolutely, it is good, and students can't just write on command. We wish they could. You're thinking, well, wait a minute. You saw it. You did it. You need to write it. That sounds easier said than done, and so you may need to think of scaffolds on what's something you can do. But believe me, if they're going to write it, they need to talk about it first, and they need to talk in complete sentences before they're going to start writing it. And now we cut you off. Go ahead, Mr. Crawford.
No, I was just going to say that when you actually have them write out complete answers, it helps with those questions where you have multiple responses.
Right.
Because if you know, like something simple as defining matter, if they can write out that entire definition of matter, then sometimes on an assessment they may have 3 different things that are all true of matter, and if they're able to write it out, as opposed to moving away from just giving them multiple choice to answer, and they're actually writing out the complete answers, it'll help them to look further and deeper into the answers whenever they have those questions.
And that's one of the reasons why the eye checks that come with FOSS, they cannot be put into Power School Assessment or IA, because if they don't type it the exact same way that it's been put in, it's going to mark it wrong, which is going to cause even more problems than what we can deal with. But so moving, next year, moving away from what we call and what we've known as power quizzes into more of the question and answering and making sure they understand the concept, as opposed to just answering a multiple choice question and moving on.
Is there a grading rubric that goes with that? Like when they write their summary or they write their...
In FOSS, yeah.
The problem is it's just not a paper one. And I just wanted to make sure, because I know we're doing a lot of talking about the sense making, and I want to make sure everybody understands it's not just something we're saying, okay, that's a great idea.
Right.
It's something that we do want to see you implement in your classrooms, because it will make a difference. And it will be very noticeable. And just looking at the data, when we went into 5th grade classrooms that did it, and 5th grade classrooms that didn't, at the end of the year you could see the difference in their SOL scores. I mean, it was literally 20, 30-point differences. But you can tell they didn't just do an investigation, they did all of the steps that went along with it. Yes?
Do we have to put all the steps in the physical notebook, or can we be using a blend with like Google Classroom? Because I've been finding, trying to help my students with the writing process, to type it out, because a lot of my students were having problems just even typing. It was like, okay, here's the question, type it out. So they were getting used to the tools of typing and word processor and all that stuff. Is that an acceptable way to handle this, or does it have to go in the paper notebook? Because
I might just make some suggestions, and that's all it is when you're thinking about it, if a student hasn't made sense in their mind and we're asking them to type, they're worried about the skills of typing, which is really hard, and maybe not gathering the content or the making sense in that typing. And so, not to say that they shouldn't type it, I'm not disagreeing with that, but sometimes if they can just engage in writing it themselves, and that writing may not be in complete sentences. It may be a picture and then they add other things and going on, and then you take it from there, and then you might ask them to type it, taking those into a complete sentence. It's very hard for students to do both at the same time. It just really is. And so if you think about it, if I'm trying to, I have never just gone and answered a question that someone might give me without maybe making some jotted notes, especially when it's something very challenging like that. Just a thought.
Additionally, Shonda makes a lot of them, but I make Nearpods too. And you can put questions in that you can have them type out the answers to, and that are aligned with this. kind of create your own questions.
My only concern is the drawing piece, the non-linguistic representation, because that's going to help your students a lot. And being able to draw it, even if they're doing it in there, that takes more time to do that than they were doing in a notebook. And believe it or not, yes, me, the digital queen, will say there are times when I actually will take down pencil and paper and do my drawings and sketches in there, and then annotate. Yes, I know. Don't look at me real strangely. I do draw. I draw with pencil and paper. But the point is, and then I do transfer some of it into a digital format just to keep up with it. But I would just decide what things you want digital and what things you want in the notebook. But I would give them that time to put the data in there and to process the data in there and be able to look at it and take it with them. Just because they may go home and they may not have access to it when they get home. But they will have access to a notebook if you let them take it home to study. That's the other
I
thought.
don't want them to take it home. It will never come back.
Exactly.
Okay, well, you may not let them take it home.
No way.
You may tell them, use their Chromebook, here's the solution, use your Chromebook, take a picture of the pages, upload it to your Chromebook. Did everybody hear that solution? If you don't let them take the notebook home, tell them, if they know how to use the camera feature, tell them to take pictures of it, upload it to their Chromebook, take the Chromebook home, i.e. notebook goes home.
Yeah, and the other thing is like the data acquisition, like,
And that works.
and FOSS gives you student notebook sheets. That does not mean that you have to use all those notebook sheets, right? What it means is you are giving students one way in which to collect data. If students know a better way that works for them to collect the data, that doesn't cause a lot of challenges, at some point we want them to start collecting their data that makes sense. So like even when they did the syringes, that data table, I probably would give it. Maybe the questions underneath, I may not, I don't know. But like drawing some of those things, it went up. It went from here to here, and I'm getting the hook. So anyway, thank you, I appreciate that. So I think some of the things is, think about where you can get your kids to this point. And we'll check back in again on that. And we're doing a great job here. How do we get here? Because this is really where it's at. That's the key piece.